All right, everybody, welcome back to another beautiful episode of the King's Table. We actually have a special guest with us today, Mike McCarthy. Welcome to the podcast, my friend. We've actually never met. This is the founder of GoBundance, one of the key founders of GoBundance, ex-CEO. And we've never met before, so just pleasure to meet you. Excited for you to be joining the conversation. And Mike Ayala will join us here in a little bit too, and we'll have a full conversation, but welcome.
Thanks. Glad to be here. I didn't want you to get started without a mic on, here. So.
We know how to bridge the gap, man. We don't mess around over here. So firstly, sorry I missed last week. You guys had such a good conversation, guys. I hate to miss it.
Did you listen to Dash?
Yeah, of course I did.
Was it better with you or without you? This is like...
I don't know, man. I think it was better. I may have to pass the torch to you, Matty. You introed amazing, man.
No way.
We were playing the paper, rock, scissors for who was going to drive the bus. But, you're back as the host with the most today, Ash, but you forgot to introduce Matty Aitchison, Matty A., the king of hospitality. You got so excited that McCarthy was here.
You forgot
to mention that Matty A., the king of hospitality, is here. We got Mike Ayala, the sage, will be with us in probably 3 or 4 minutes, if we're lucky. And I'm Aaron. I'm the other guy. Something fun to say today. We have 99 subscribers on our YouTube page. 99.
We're growing.
100th.
I promise you guys,
right now,
my plan of going to YouTube is going to pay off. I know you guys are still giving me a hard time that we aren't on the podcast channels. But for all you guys that are listening to us, make sure to subscribe, be 100, and tell your friends about it.
And drop a comment down below. This is interactive.
Talk to us about what we're saying here for sure.
We love the questions, comments, a little trash talking. Only if it's directed at Aaron, though, not me.
Yeah, you can judge me.
Little flower.
I was gonna say, don't make Mooch be wrong, guys. That we're only on YouTube, so make sure you engage with us.
Hey, it was just so you know. So Matty and Ash, we are getting comments on our YouTube page that we need to be going and replying to people. We aren't I'm seeing some questions on here right now from people. So I apologize for those of you that commented. I'm going to reply to you as soon as I finish talking to these guys today.
I love this.
Are they any good comments or are they just like some...
This one says you can't eat your net worth. What a powerful statement. That's from Mad Dog 6604. Thanks for the episode. Great insights. Debbie Bowman said, love this week's conversation. I look forward to every Friday when you drop another episode. This week has given me so much to think about as the year ends in 2024. I mean, my best year ever. And she goes on and on with comments there. I should jump. And that was just from last week's episode. So thank you, Debbie. Thank you, Mad Dog. And we'll get back at you.
Well, I know we're going to have a really great episode today. Not only do I have a good topic, and it's something that's really on my heart right now, but we also have Mr. McCarthy here. So I think we're going to have some really colorful dialogue about this. And let me preface the conversation by, I was listening to the All In podcast and they were asking some questions that really started provoking more of this. And then I got lost in some wormholes. And the fundamental question at the top that they were talking about that I think is really fascinating is like, what does it mean to be an American? And if we dig right into that for a minute, what's showing up for me recently is that how do you maintain and create drive over the long run? And I think that, and let me say a few things, right, is that I think a lot of the challenges we have in our society today is that we're sort of losing this vision, this direction, this drive that perhaps got us here. And I don't think it's unachievable to bring it back. I just think that that's the cause of a lot of it. We as a society, they were talking about this concept, and I'm struggling with this too within my life, within my business, that as you achieve prosperity, you become comfortable, you become soft. And I think if you look at that over generations of time, prosperity is something we all strive to have, but also is the cause of a lot of decline. So they put that in the frame of like, when the nation becomes more prosperous or the GDP increases, our obesity increases, our heart disease increases, we have declining birth rates, we focus more on our life or our business or our money than future generations. So by definition, if the declining birth rate is, or I guess if the birth rate is decreasing, by definition, we are slowly becoming less prosperous. And And within I'll say really openly too, just within my business, we have achieved some incredible milestones. And as you achieve these next level milestones, you start to see that the drive that got you there may not get you to the next place. So you have to almost re-engage the team or the people or the inspiration on, okay, what is it going to drive us to the next level? And that doesn't necessarily mean more money. It just means perhaps more peace, more structure, more stability, and hopefully more prosperousness. So it's just a really fascinating topic for me. I think it is at the core of a lot of the challenges we're suffering in America. I think that you have I don't want to make an ageist generalization of generations, but we are dealing with something that we haven't yet ever dealt with, which is a population of people that are so driven with technology, they just act and behave completely different than people 2 generations away from them. And that is very rare. Like, the world is changing so fast that we don't even know what to do with it. So that's the big framework of what I wanted to present, and wanted to see what you guys were thinking, and what does it mean to be American? What does it mean to be successful in the next phase of our society? And I thought it was an interesting thing that we call this the King's Table, because these are the things that kings think about. If you think about the actual king sitting on their kingdom, looking at the people, a lot of the situation we're in right now is because I think that the kings want to hold on to their power, and so they allow chaos to happen. They almost create chaos. They create division because it allows them to stay on their throne. If everyone's fighting amongst each other, they're not coming after me. And I think we've talked about on this podcast, like, I think it's changing. And that's shifting. People are starting to wake up to this. If you're listening to this podcast, you're definitely waking up. And so I thought it'd be, what? Or you're awake already.
I said, you're not woke, you're awake.
Yeah, that's right. So I just thought it'd be a fascinating conversation as we process this within our own kingdoms or our own world. So yeah, we'll just go around. Mooch, what are you thinking?
I love what you said there. Prosperity creates chaos. All of us have had different journeys of wealth. And I'm probably one of the best examples of creating wealth and then creating chaos, and that wealth creating new bad habits that ended up extinguishing that wealth several times. Most people aren't as dumb as me, and they don't have to go to zero several times. But I did, right? I didn't get to learn as much from other people. It reminds me of this saying, I can't quite remember the story, right? But it was like, the guy was talking about how, his grandpa rode on horses or rode on camels, right? Yeah. And then his dad got to have a truck and started a business, and now they drive Rolls Royces and Land Rovers. And then, or maybe like now they drive nice cars, and their kids are going to drive the Rolls Royces and Range Rovers. And then the next year they're going to be riding horses and camels again, because of the way that family wealth happens. Like, when you go broke and you earn it yourself, you treat it different. When you're in a growth stage, when you can remember what it felt like to be broke, you treat the money different. When you forget what it feels like to be broke, then that starts the downhill slide. And you're right, like this economy that the world has been in, or the US has been in for a long time. Let's say the past 20 years, I've been talking, if we get into the Fed stuff, it's a lot about like post 90s, like starting in 2000, after September 11th, after stimulus, after things like that. People since then have lived in a pretty nice life if they're growing up in the US. And they'll make fun of people and say, with the old stories of like, oh, you walked to school uphill both ways in the snow for 10 miles. But it really is like, life used to be harder. And
now you don't even walk. You motor. What do you call those? Like electric bike to school now. You don't even walk. You electric bike to school.
Yeah. You're instead of wearing a backpack, it's a pull cart behind you. Like, technology has made a lot of things easier, and as a result, we take the hard for granted. So I hadn't thought about it at like a national level before, but I've definitely thought about it as an individual level. So I do think it's an interesting thing. I know myself that we even talked about it maybe 2 months ago on the podcast, that I have a tough time being motivated when I have enough. Meaning 4 or 5 months ago, 6 to 9 months ago, like half of my business income went to zero, right? I lost $5 million worth of values in some of my properties. Instead of making multiple six figures every month, everything, my income has been cut down. And I remember telling you guys, if I was broke right now, I'd be moving to another state. I'd be like booking Southwest flights and going and figuring out where there's an auction that nobody was at. I would be taking a whole bunch of action if I was broke and desperate. But because I'm like just wealthy enough, not as wealthy as I want to be, I'm making enough money to like be comfortable. Definitely not as much as I want to be making per month. I really want to be making what I was making in 2021. Every listener's probably going to say that right now too. Yep. We'd all love to be making what we were making in 2021. But I tell you what, it was night and day difference for what I'm doing. So, yep, I have a tough time being motivated when I don't have something. I guess the only advice I would give, so all I did was just state a whole bunch of problems and agree with that thesis, the problems. I think the best thing somebody can do is have a why. And when you have that why, it should keep you motivated. My vision board of the private jet on the wall, right? My vision board of the 20,000 square foot house on Maui on the beach, like that stuff should also keep me motivated. But I also think that sometimes as we get older, different times, like, well, maybe I don't need the jet this year, or maybe I'll have it sometime. But the vision board should keep you motivated, and the why. Like people are like, why do you want to be a billionaire, Aaron? If I keep remembering that, I should continue to have the drive as if I was broke and probably make a lot more money right now.
It reminds me of, I was flying around a lot, maybe post-COVID, that saying of strong men create great times create weak men create bad times, or something along those lines, right? And it feels like we're kind of on the tail end of that flywheel of, it's been a big conversation and topic in our American culture amongst, kind of two sides of the coin. Men are too feminized. We're getting weak. We're losing the fabric, the grit, of what this society and culture of what made America great built on. I mean, I think there is some truth to that, no doubt. But I like what Aaron said, because when I went through this last year, sold off 3 of my hotels, I achieved a level of success, at least in terms of monetary success, that I'd always dreamed of, that I was always working towards. And I'm sitting on more cash than I've ever had in my life. And yet I feel a little soft, a little lost, like I've lost that edge and that grit. And while it's still there, as I was doing a lot of evaluation with friends and just talking through people, what I really learned about myself, and I think it's, an opportunity for people to reflect for themselves, because it might be different for everybody. I know for me personally, and I think it might have some correlation potentially to this macro discussion that we're having, which is I'm a very mission-driven person. Mm-hmm. It's not always necessarily about money. It just happens to be the missions and the arenas that I like to play in are measured monetarily in some capacities, but it might be different for other people in different capacities, right? But there's a mission that people are pulled by, that have them willing to run through walls, to work 80 hours, to move their family up across the country and go to courthouse steps, to do whatever it is to achieve that mission. And with that mission being critical to certain people, right, that's what gets the best out of us. That's what forces us to kind of evolve and innovate and metamorphosize, and to kind of peel back layers of our own onion that sometimes you just never will be forced to do without something driving you at that capacity. And I think for a lot of America right now, we don't really know. Well, some people have one mission and some people have another mission. And I think we're seeing 2 parallel missions of one side wanting one thing and another side wanting another thing, that's creating this division that a lot of us are feeling, right? Which is leading to a lot of different challenges that we're facing in culture, society, economics. And I think it's global in a lot of ways. But that being said, for me, I would look back and I go, man, like when I have a mission, stay the fuck out of my way. Like, stay out of my way, because I will do whatever it takes to achieve that mission. I didn't have, and still kind of don't have, a big mission right now like I did when I was building my hotel company before I sold it. I was obsessed with it. I was willing to do anything and everything it took to make that successful. And now that that mission has kind of been wrapped up, and Jocko Willink said this a lot of guys in the military, when they get deployed, right? Servicemen and servicewomen who go overseas, it's mission critical. I know exactly what I'm supposed to do. I'm willing to sacrifice whatever it takes to get that mission done. You get home and they're like, I'm lost, dude. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm a leaf floating in the wind. So it is a very interesting discussion. And I don't know, this guy right next to me is somebody that I know has achieved an insane amount of success in family and business. And you've kind of had some stuff go full circle in a lot of ways. So, like, how do you keep the drive, the grit, the purpose for pushing forward when really you don't have to do anything with where you're at in life?
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And yeah, I love everything you guys are saying. I'll kind of direct us back to something Ashish was saying, which was around what got you here won't get you there. And that whole concept of like, you have to have a reinvention. And thank God you do, because I actually don't want to be that same person, because the person who was building the early businesses that I started was running from something, not running towards something.
Yeah.
And, I think we're at a point in time in our culture where we need a reinvention of our country. I think people believe in something they feel a part of. When we're fractured and divided, who wants to feel like they're a part of that? Like when we're a part of a community, whether it's a country, a city, an organization, a team, or even a family, we want to feel like what we say matters. We want to feel like we're respected for our opinion. We want to be able to show up and know that we can be who we are and not be judged for that. And that's a tough thing to do in an entire society, but we've really shied away from that. And I think it's because people have lost touch with that special feeling of what it means to be an American. Like, there used to be such pride in being an American, and now there's like a little bit of shame that goes along with that. And so I think we're on the journey of reinvention in this country, which is a beautiful thing. And I think the sayings that you guys were mentioning, like, if you do the things that are easy, then life is hard. And if you do the things that are hard, life gets easy. And that's what kept popping in my mind. And it's like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And the story you were sharing, Aaron, there's actually a similar saying in like 75 cultures on the planet right now: shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. So it's absolutely proven that people lose touch with that drive once they get into that comfortable space. I think the way to move through this is that when you get to that place of success, it's your duty to actually go in and heal those broken parts of yourself as a human being, and to go inward and really find those things that are driving you that might not be healthy to be driven by those, and then embrace the things that are actually healthy drives towards something greater than yourself. That comes through becoming more resourced, more healthy in yourself, your body, and then being able to show up in the world differently as an example for like, hey, that guy's worth a lot of money, but he's not an asshole. That guy actually cares about other people and will bend over backwards to serve others and bring people together and make an impact. And that's what comes from somebody that feels resourced, healthy, and complete in some level within themselves, and they can give back. And what we've forgotten as Americans is to do that. We haven't gotten healthy in our core. We got to take out the trash in politics. We got to get back to our core. And then when we do, we can go serve others. That's what America was really about, is being a model for what can be possible when we all come together and work together. And it worked for a long time. Now it's not working. We need to get back to where it's working again. So
I love that.
Dude, I got to say, like what Mike said there, and we didn't get to give Mike a proper intro. Like, Mike has built these really, really giant companies within real estate, within Keller Williams, and getting to see just what he built over the last 10 years. And then as one of the founders of GoBundance and other things, like Mike is an excellent, excellent business CEO and business driver. But what you heard there was like life skills and life advice. And I love seeing that side of it. Mike delivered a little boot to school for my son today. Right. So when it's talking about people,
is it the 10th one? And it actually
it
worked?
was the boot number 10 for my son's broken ankle. Mike saw that I needed some help with that, and he dropped one off too. I guess one thing I want to tag team on with what Mike said there that stuck out to me, right? When I think about my rise and fall at different times, is he said it depends on what drives you. Well, so when I was 22, 23, 25, I had a chip on my shoulder. I had spent 2 years in prison. I had to make up for lost time. I had to prove to everybody that thought I was a loser that I was going to be capable of taking over the world. So my drive wasn't necessarily like good, right? It worked, but it wasn't for good intention. And so then when I lost my money, maybe that makes sense. And then I had drive when I started my own business that was about, Charlotte being in an incubator, with bubblers, with oxygen masks on, born 6 weeks early, and said, man, I need to provide better for my family, and I'm going to do this, this, and this. And that was drive. And then it gets to the point of, honestly, there's nothing left on the board to buy except for like the private jet and a bigger boat and a bigger house or something like that. And you forget about what drives you. So I think it's important to figure out what's going to drive me on my next step and the next things that I'm doing, because just as Mike said that, I just remembered the different times of like, yeah, the drive that got me here was a chip on my, at this one stage was a chip on my shoulder. Wasn't healthy, but it worked. This one was to help my family. Healthier, worked. But then once I hit that the why, it was like, now I provide. They eat. Because when I started my company, I didn't know how to feed the kids all the time. Right. So anyway.
I mean, I think what I heard too is, and I see this reflecting back at me too, is when I make stupid decisions, it's because I don't feel whole. I'm not loving myself, I'm not loving the people around me. I'm not coming from a secure place. And I think, Mooch, to add on to what you were saying, is you don't have to lose everything, like actually lose it in order to self-destruct, right? Like Maddie's in a place where he made it, and you could still self-destruct. You haven't yet, right? But you could pick up bad habits and you could do the wrong things. And even though you don't lose your abundance or lose your wealth, you could still lose everything. And I think that's what's really interesting about this, is that it's almost like human nature is at its default looking for something to create a problem. Like it's looking for the problem. It's like, okay, now I got all the money. Now let me create another problem. Because I solved the money problem. Now I got to go solve another problem. And I think that's what I'm seeing. And I love how Mike framed it, is that none of those problems are real and none of them exist as long as you are whole. And that's the work we really have to do within ourselves, within our families, within our companies, within our society, or within our country. And I think you're spot on. The question is how do we do that?
Mm-hmm. Let's not get technical here.
I think it is very interesting to think about that, right? And go ahead, Mike.
Well, I mean, I have a really strong belief that it starts with strengthening the family units. Because I think that's where you learn how to interact with and settle disputes, and how you show up in your family and how you're taught to show up there is how you'll show up in the world. And so I think too, even in in the most poor areas in the world, there are kids that don't have the attention they need, and in the wealthiest households in the world, there are kids that don't have the attention that they need. And how are we expecting either of those to handle the future that they should be stepping into? One is to create something from where they're at so they can move forward in life out of poverty, move their family lineage through that. And the other is coming from having an opportunity to take on a legacy that they're not being prepared for because they don't get the time that they need typically with those entrepreneurs. So I think we have to really make it cool to have an amazing family again, and to really show up for your family. It sort of became cool to hustle and sacrifice your family in order to build businesses. And I don't think that's like the most uncool thing that's out there.
I was talking with somebody the other day, and they asked me, what is the most valuable asset on your balance sheet to you? And literally the first thing that popped into my head was my family. I was like, my family is the greatest asset to me, and I invest in them every day. I pay attention to that asset.
What valuation do you use?
I don't. But it was an interesting thought, right? Because there is no measure of like, but wealth means something different to so many people and in different capacities. And as I was thinking about it, how many people don't invest in themselves, let alone my family? Like, come on, man. Like that's just by default, they're there, right? And two guys that I have literally modeled my family's kind of lifestyle and goals and a lot of our communication is two guys on this call. This guy sitting next to me, Mike and Aaron. We used to do a ton of stuff with Aaron and his family when they lived right next to us. Mike, is one of the creators of Fambundance and really emphasized and showcased not only how he lives his life with his family, but also by teaching and providing tools and training to other families. And it is very interesting to me, of all of the compliments that I get, the most compliments I get overwhelmingly is, I wouldn't say envy or jealousy. It's more of like people who admire my family unit and how valuable I create time and energy and intention around my family. And so when you said that of how do we start fixing some of these things, it is very interesting, right? Because you hear them always talk about, right, fatherless households. And I think about leadership starts with men in households. And if that's absent, day one, you're already screwed, right? You're already way behind the eight ball. And how many fatherless households are there around America? And then when you look at some of our greatest leaders historically, a lot of them had really strong father figures or mother figures, but good, strong family foundational values and right units that they really were the launching pads for those individuals to go out and problem solve and innovate, create and add value and do all these things, right? So it's just an interesting thought of going.
I feel like, Maddie,
we start with our family.
I feel like, Maddie, that you're spot on. I mean, I don't want to say it's obvious, but you're totally spot on. Why is it that the whole world is having less kids? Why are you seeing in every major society around the world a declining population? Why do people not want to have kids then? I mean, I posted something on the group chat about dinks. Did you see that?
No.
Do you know what dinks are? Double income, no kids. Often they have dogs and not kids.
Oh, I was thinking pickleball dinking.
Yeah, they're called dinks.
There's less sex happening. I mean, just to back it up to the what creates what creates life. I mean, could it be related to that? I'm just proposing that.
No,
technology.
I saw a statistic.
Logistically makes sense.
I saw a statistic yesterday that there are more like virgin men in the world than there ever has been historically ever. So I'm not saying that is, but you said less sex, right? I think there's more socially awkward, weird, I don't know how to interact in person type of people out there nowadays. Then obviously you've got a lot of our nutrition and wellness, that hormonally ties into a lot of stuff between men and women that's going on. That's a whole other kind of rabbit hole.
There's no reason to have an accident anymore either. Like the technology is made.
Now you can have a snip, right? And just make sure that you don't have 5 kids coming down the pipe. But
Mikey,
it is
I want to bring Mike into the. I want to bring Mikey.
Mike, what do you think, Mike?
Ayala, the sage, into the conversation. He's going to be so ready for this one because
Mike, what do you think, Mike?
What Ashish started us with, because you have no idea what we've been talking about, was this concept of as America's prosperity has gone up, life has gotten crappier. The wealthier we get, the least healthy, the more overweight. And we shared a quick story about, how every 3 generations essentially goes from someone being poor to wealthier to super wealthy to the kids losing all the money and being poor again, and kind of comparing that to the U.S. Political stuff. Siddhi, what do you like? I figured this is like right up your alley of the stuff you'd like to talk about.
How do we prevent self-destruction?
How do you prevent the failure of the U.S.? Is the U.S. failing?
Well, you join GoBundance and start taking testosterone shots from all the doctors that are around. Because, it's interesting because I don't know if you guys heard the Tucker Carlson interview on the All In. Did you guys hear that?
That's what this is about.
Yeah. Mikey, I literally framed the entire conversation on that because I thought it was so powerful.
If you look at what an amazing conversation to jump into the middle of, but if you look at what the real problem is, if you just Tucker made the comment about Japan, which I thought was so interesting because I've been to Japan and it's one of the greatest countries ever. And there's two correlations there. I mean, there was a financial part of that conversation where, the U.S. central bank, we're actually, of all the 7 central banks, like there's actually 3 of them that are in a worse position than we are when it comes to debt to GDP. And so there's 3 central banks that we're not even there yet. And Japan is obviously one of them. And when Tucker was making this comment, like so many people talk from a financial perspective about Japan and their, debt to GDP and stagflation and everything that's going on there. But when you go there, their society is so much more structured than it is here. And you just see it. Like literally you're walking down the street and none of the bikes are chained up because people don't steal. They have morals and ethics and values. And so, you can look at it from a financial perspective, which is one conversation, but then you look at it from the other side, and Tucker made such an interesting comment. He said, well, that's what happens when you take all of the high testosterone men and they fly themselves into warships.
Aircraft carriers, yeah.
Yeah, and if you look at the evolution in the United States, and I don't think they really touched on this, but if you look at just the history of the US and the breakdown of the family unit, so when we got drug into the World War, which was the same thing, it was Japan, right, that basically drug us into that. So it was all their high testosterone men that drug us into this war that we didn't want to be into. And now everybody's bitching all the time about the United States and how we have our nose and everything. But if you go back 70 years, 80 years ago, however long it was, they had to drag us into this war. We're like over here minding our own business. We don't want anything to do with the world's problems. And now we're the complete opposite US. But if you look at that whole time, so we were not prepared for war. We had just came out of the Industrial Revolution and we sent all of our men overseas, and women had to become the head of the household. And not only did they become the head of the household, they had to start working in factories to keep up with all the manufacturing. And so I think that was the beginning of the breakdown of the family, the nuclear family in the United States. And even before that, if you look at generations of thousands of years, like families live together. And Ash, you can speak to this, like families everywhere, like they lived together and they stayed together and they supported each other. And that was like the breakdown, I think, for the United States, where everything started to kind of unravel. Men went away, women started working. And even when we came back, like we were in this age of like just boom. It was like a boom era. And people started moving from wherever they lived with their family units to, suburbia, and they wanted to be in cities. And it started this whole progression of the breakdown of the nuclear family. Mm-hmm. And so like husbands and wives moved away and they only see the grandparents once a year. And then the kids start seeing all of that. And so to answer your question, what I think is really interesting, and even the conversation, what a great place to enter a conversation, by the way.
Yeah, Mike, we just plugged you into the source.
Welcome to the party, baby.
So I think about, the young men and what they've grown up with. So I grew up without a father. And, many guys in GoBundance, like we've got Mike here, but, a lot of entrepreneurs and really successful people had some sort of breakdown in their family that they said, this ends with me. And we get intentional and we start saying, I'm not going to be the father that's not present. I'm not going to be the husband that's not present. I'm not going to be the abusive husband. I'm going to be with my children. And so we start working toward a life that's different. But a lot of young men today grew up in a family that even if the family unit was together, they didn't see a model that they want to mirror. So I think there's 2 parts to this problem. Number one, it's the fabric that they grew up in. They were not raised by a strong father, and they don't know how to be a father. And they're scared shitless because they're saying, like, I don't know how to be a dad. I don't know how to be a husband. This is in our DNA, by the way. It doesn't, like, we're programmed to be good. 1,000 years ago, there wasn't, everybody's read What to Expect When You're Expecting, and we have, prenatal classes, and we get to go learn how to breathe. I mean, back in the day, they just did that shit. Like, they didn't have to learn how to have a kid. And when Kara and I left the hospital with Dylan, I'll never forget looking at Kara, scared shitless. I'm 21, Kara's 20, and we've got this little baby. And I told Kara, I said, I had to go through more blue tape, red tape to get my driver's license than I had for the hospital to release me and take my kid home. There's no manual on this. And I think that the guys in this generation are scared shitless to be men because they don't know how to be men. I think that's one problem. And then when you think of the current, by the way, I'm an optimist on our future. I think the United States, I think we're going to figure it out. I'm an optimist on humanity. I think we're going to figure this out. But I think when that same group of people that are scared shitless to be dads and to be husbands, when they look at the world that's ahead of them, they're like, I'm not bringing a kid into this bullshit. So I think those are the two real problems at the end of the day.
I love that Mike's an optimist. I did not think that the way that Mike's always talking here about the world coming to an end and none of this stuff matters. Like, I did not think he was going to say I'm an optimist for the future of the U.S. Dude, I would have fallen out of my chair. The talk about coming in midway through the podcast and just crushing it. Mike, who wasn't here for our first 40 minutes, but made it sound like he was here the whole time. Brilliant.
Thanks.
Maddie, what do you think?
Like a mic drop after that? We're like, okay.
Well, I just cracked open a beer, so I mean, I'm ready to start talking now, boys. Let's see some
of you guys.
Table now.
Hey, can we? So there's another topic.
Mike, tonight, by the way, Mooch. Are we going to Joe Rogan? Mike, is going to Joe Rogan?
I go to Joe Rogan about once a week right now. I've got extra tickets if you want to go tonight, Ayala. It starts at 10 p.m.
Daniel Del Real invited me, but my wife is a pumpkin and she turns into a pumpkin about 8. And I have such a busy early day tomorrow. I was like, man, I know these GoBundance guys and we're going to be out till 3 or 4 a.m.
I'm not, but they will.
I'm not. I can't.
Yeah, I'm going to Joe Rogan, but I'm not staying up till 3 or 4. But I see Joe Rogan about once a week right now. So
I think this conversation is so powerful. I think what I'm taking away from this is like it really goes back to the basics of family, values, wholeness, self-ownership. And Mike, you were scratching at some really good stuff about just being men and being fathers. But I think that, you cannot ignore the how technology has sort of forced people not to engage with other people. And now I don't even know if we know what it means to be a good citizen. And I think that that's super fascinating to me. I'm an optimist too, but like, how do you overcorrect that? One of the things they were talking about on the podcast was that we as humans have innate characteristics and technology cannot make those things different, right? So like AI is AI, but it's not going to change human nature. Human nature is human nature. So it's going to be really fascinating. What do you think is what has to change? If we're saying all the right things, but is that are people going to do those things?
So I think it doesn't take an entire nation to change. It takes a group of people. And I'm not making excuses for us as men or women or anything else either, and this is where, yes, I'm an optimist, but when you look at all the things that, could be labeled conspiracy theory, I just don't think it is. I mean, if you look at Gary Brecka's teaching, and I've become a huge fan of Gary in the last 12 months since I got to spend some time with him. But when you look at like the food system and you look at everything that we're putting in our bodies, and again, I'm not making excuses for us, but why is testosterone so low?
Yeah.
Why do we have the hormonal issues? There's so many problems that are not just like, hey, you know what? I'm just going to pull my head out of the sand and become a man and stand up for it. But when we start taking care of ourselves, and I actually think that there's an awakening happening when it comes to health and fitness and, mental, the work that we're doing on ourselves. I don't think the entire country has to awaken it at once. But if you look at even just, and I'm not saying this because Mike's sitting here, but you look at how many groups have, popped up like GoBundance that are just like, hey, how do we become better humans? How do we become better husbands? How do we become better leaders? How do we become better men? And that's what gives me optimism, because we don't have to fix the whole country. We just have to fix ourselves. We have to fix our family unit. We have to fix our heritage. It's me and no more. This stops with me. And the whole idea of, epigenetics, and the idea even 20 years ago that like my dad was an alcoholic, so I'm going to be an alcoholic. Well, there's some truth to that, but that doesn't mean you can't break that cycle. My family was poor, so I'm going to be poor. How many people have you talked to that said, I'm the first person in my family lineage that I can track that graduated from college or was an entrepreneur or whatever it is? And that's what gives me hope, because Ashish, to your point or to your question, I don't think we have to fix everything at once. I think we just have to fix ourselves. We have to fix our sphere of influence. We have to fix our lineage. And if I can put out 2 boys that act like men, then that's double the amount of boys that acted like men that my dad put out.
Mm-hmm. That's why I feel like, going back to that comment of like my greatest asset, I truly believe this and feel it through and through, that my greatest asset is my family. And when I keep investing in myself and my family, I'm trusting in that ownership of that being the most important thing on my balance sheet, that most important thing of measuring success in my life and richness and wealth in my life is me and my family. When most people have it flipped upside down and it's going, how many commas and zeros do I have in my bank account? How many real tangible assets do I have on my balance sheet? And I think if we could look at ourselves and our families, and like you said, more and more people through technology, access to information, courses, teachers, all kinds of people, right, sharing information now. It's a double-edged sword, but if we could look at ourselves and our families as the greatest investment and trust in that process, and kind of have that crock pot versus the microwave mindset and go, I'm playing long on this investment, but it's a guaranteed win for you, your family, and ultimately humanity as a whole. If people looked at it through that set of lenses, it'd be very interesting to see what dynamics and cultural changes and societal changes and economic changes would follow that type of mentality.
Totally agree.
Hey,
Mike, so bring us home.
I think I love what you guys are saying about, we have to focus on people who don't just go along with how things have always been done in their family. And you've heard in business, like the most dangerous thing is just saying, that's just how we do things around here. Right. So you hear like in the family, if you take on that, it's like, well, that's just, that just runs in the family. Right. You hear that? Well, someone has to decide that shit runs out with me. Like, I'm done with this, and I'm going to change that. And I think that's where it lies. And I think then it's a journey of becoming the most resource, healthy, and whole version of yourself you can be. And that takes some real inner work and guidance and community and good coaches and mentors. And so I would just encourage anybody who's listening, and even I'm talking to myself here, is lean into what's painful, lean into what's difficult, because that's where the growth is. That's where you're going to get stretched and molded into the person that you're meant to be. Life isn't supposed to be free of pain and suffering. It's supposed to be a balance of all of these things. And I think we've gotten to a point where we're just always looking for the easy button as individuals in our family and societies. I know I've pushed it a few times in my life. And I know that for me, I'm in a season of getting back to being inspired. And it's no longer the vision I was. It's no longer what I'm running from. Because at first my vision was what I was running from, like what Aaron was saying earlier. I needed to prove something. Then I wanted a lifestyle, like Aaron was even saying too. Then he shifted to a vision where he was aspiring towards what he wanted, a better life for his family. And I've done those two visions in my life, and now I'm on the third one. And it's not the vision I'm running from or the one I'm running towards. It's the one that's coming from within me. And it's coming from within a person who's done a lot of work and is ready and has the abilities to serve and do something that only I can do for the time that I have left on this earth. And it's my job to go figure out what that is and give that gift before I depart, because the thing of this conversation is we won't know the end of the story. We'll all be gone by the time this shit gets figured out. So let's make the most of it and do whatever we can to set the rest of this planet up to continue to thrive after we leave it. And we need a small group of people that think like that. Like Mike said, it only takes a small group, not the whole country, to decide to change.
I love it.
I'll still be here when it happens.
I was going to say, I may
just to be clear, even if it's 300 years from now, I'll be sitting in my cryo chamber and I'll watch it.
You were the first guy who signed up to be Elon's Neuralink Tesla.
Dude, I will totally. I'll pay for the Neuralink, man. I won't even just volunteer. I'll say put that stuff in my head. I have 2 issues of breaking news here. We now have 100 subscribers on the podcast. While the podcast was going today, I posted on Instagram and I said, "Hey, who's going to be number 100?" And somebody came through. So thank you.
It was actually me.
All right. So thank you, Mike, for taking us from 99 to 100. I have a really important question. Then we'll figure out if we're going to have time for another topic or if we're going to drop the mic. So, and it's quick yes and no for each of you guys. We're talking about the foundation of society and how we perform. If you are parked far away in a parking lot at the grocery store and you get to your car and you unload your groceries, do you walk the cart back and put it back away in the cart rack 100% of the time?
Well, I'm going to answer this one last. I'm going to
Great
answer this one last because I feel very passionately. If you are one of those lazy assholes that put your little cart up in the little planter box.
You just said you were going to answer last. You just said you were going to answer last.
It's too late. All right. So Matt, you put it away 100% of the time. I'm going to be honest.
Yes.
I don't put the cart. I'll put it up on a curb sometimes. I'll hide it behind another car, but I justify it with like job security.
Why are you asking the question?
All the weights on the.
All right, let's hear everybody else. Mikey, you put it back.
All the areas where he can personally grow. Fear of death, returning grocery carts. It's good.
I'm not afraid of dying anymore. It's not going to happen.
I never leave it where it can roll. I leave it where I prop it up on, like in California.
All right, me and Ash are in the same boat. Mike, do you put the shopping carts away?
Mike, don't do it.
100%.
Why are you asking the question, Mooch?
100%.
Mike McCarthy, both.
So then
both
this
Mikes
is
100%.
This becomes a debate around then one of the most famous personal development quotes of all time is how you do one thing is how you do everything.
Yeah, make your bed, baby.
But I just think there's so many like that. If like when I walk by, or here's a perfect example. I was in the airport today. I'm in a hurry. Boiling. I'm washing my hands. I get the paper towel and I throw it in the trash and it falls out of the trash. The asshole would be like, oh, whatever. The janitor will pick that up. No big deal. I got to run.
Job security.
I can't see
for the janitor.
That's what I'm his job. I just personally, it's a personal integrity issue with me that if you're not disciplined enough to walk 30 feet to put your cart back, to follow a process that helps a bunch of other people instead of them chasing your shit around or picking your trash up on the ground. To me, I have integrity not only for myself and my own disciplines, but it's caring about the next person around me. And that I think is something that a lot of people are missing right now is, oh, the next guy will get it. And it goes back to Jeff Hoffman's, I think of his speech all the time. There is no they. They aren't going to clean up after your cart for you, Mr. Aaron Amuchastegui. They are going to aren't responsible for picking up my trash, even though that is part of what they do, right? So I think that is something that for most people, having that level of personal integrity of your own standards, and maybe your standards just aren't at that level where it's putting the cart back is that important. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm not picking on you, but I'm just saying I think a lot of people have lowered their standards to thinking mediocre shit is okay when we need to be raising the standards and going, if I can't walk my cart 30 feet and take an extra 30 seconds to put it back in there, we're probably trending in the wrong direction around personal standards and disciplines.
I knew it would be a good topic for that. If you miss the urinal, though, do you go wipe up the floor?
Play this out, Mooch. Why didn't you ask the question?
All right, we're not getting into semantics here.
All
okay?
right. So but hey, I wanted to ask that question really, because it does matter. I mean, it kind of matters. It's just a funny topic that comes up a lot, and it usually drives some pretty passionate thoughts with something as simple as a shopping cart. And so no wonder when we get into more complicated issues in life. But I do like what Maddie said. How you do one thing is how you do everything. So Ashish and I must see it as something completely different than the other guys do, because I do believe in that quote. I do believe in success and how you do one thing is another, but it's a fun thing to get to. Do we want to talk about the Fed today, or do we want to wrap it up with family? Mike has something to say about the shopping cart issue. Mike Ayala, I could see it in his eyes.
I mean, you guys,
you got my back, Mike.
I do. And so I'll literally park at the far end of the parking lot, buy a shopping cart corral.
Me too.
Just because and here's the thing, you know what? Even if I know that there's somebody whose job depends on picking up carts, how many times do you see a cart freaking rolling away and hitting a really nice Tesla? And so you've got people like Aaron that are going to live forever, and they get run over by a shopping cart and they die early. Like, that's bad.
I heard from God directly that if you do this, then you're bound to get shitty parking spots the rest of your life. So I don't know, like karma, whatever you want to call it.
God directly at Burning Man. At Burning Man, God spoke to me.
Let's pivot. I wanted Mooch you to talk about the Fed. There has been an article, you can speak to it, an article that says that next year the Fed is planning to reduce rates by 6 times. And is like one of the biggest things that's being retweeted right now as if it's news. And Mooch is going to debunk that story right now, right here, the only place, and it's going to turn into a meme at the King's table. But Mooch, why don't you explain what that article is about and why does everyone think it's true, and tell us why it's false?
Yeah, let me see if I can share some stuff here.
I didn't mean that the other boys didn't know.
You guys see the King's Table podcast there? Boom, 101, everybody. 101, we nailed it. All right. Here is the article that everybody's retweeting, but it's all over Instagram. The Federal Reserve is poised to cut interest rates 6 times in 2024. ING Economics says interest rates cuts would be a response to slowing U.S. economy. ING says cuts will start in the second quarter, extend well into 2025. And everybody is retweeting it, reposting it, sharing the stuff as if it's truth, or as if it's news, or as if it's undeniable news. And I think it's just a crock of crap when I see how many people keep posting it, because what everybody's saying now, the headline shows the picture of the head of the Fed on Instagram and on Facebook, and it says Fed poised to cut rates 6 times starting in second quarter, according to ING. And everyone's like, yes, the world's over. So then I'm like, who is ING? Right? Because I could say the same thing, like according to the King's Table podcast, ING is the leading European universal bank. What? Wait, they do lending and financial services, and they run stock and life insurance and retirement. Do they have a reason to tell people, hey, everything's fine, like you should start investing, the Fed's going to start lowering rates again? Like, of course they do. So it's like taking news from people that are trying to create their own destiny, because for as many reports that'll say that, there'll be as many reports. JP Morgan isn't saying it. A US-based bank isn't saying it. A Dutch origin European bank is saying it. JP Morgan's not. Chase is not. Wells Fargo isn't. Nobody else is predicting this. But a bank that has nothing going on in the US and everybody's treating it for news. That's one of the problems with news. That's why I'm almost as fired up as Matt is about shopping carts with this one. And so then we go into, like, as you look at again, what I think is where we're at, and what I talked about like 2 or 3 podcasts ago, is the Fed drank the Kool-Aid when September 11th happened, and they weaponized the Fed at that point. And we see like these rises and falls. So, but in the biggest crash, at the time, so after the biggest run up in prices previous to now, we saw the Fed rate go from July 2004. If you guys, everyone's, I was gonna say if you're looking at us on YouTube, but everyone is. God bless you all. On here for my chart, July 2006, we hit 5.24%, and that held for 14 months before it started dropping, and it was a total of 20 months before they had 6 rate cuts. So we haven't started dropping yet. So somebody brilliant was just saying, hey, they did it that way before when it got that high, so maybe it's just going to copy what happened before. but the economic trends that we saw back here in 07, 08 was prop to fail. And the stats that we're looking at aren't going to show us, even though I think recession is coming. I don't think it's going to be the same. So, but what I think is going to happen is not what we saw in 2007. I think what we're going to see is what happened between 1995 and 2000 is just the Fed and everybody else saying no, like they drank the Kool-Aid. They do not like what happened when they lowered rates before, and they don't really care about what has happened to real estate. That's what we talked about the last few times. They've learned that the economy can be just fine even if they crush real estate. And the reality is they don't need 5 million houses to transact every year, 10 million houses to transact every year for the rest of the economy to be fine. Now we're all struggling. The five of us hate it. The interest rates are up. I wish that it was true, but I just hate it when people post news and then they repost it as if it's news when that highlights. So tomorrow's headline on my Instagram is going to have a picture of the guy on the Fed, and it's going to say, Fed will not reduce rates next year until 2026. Be ready for bloodbath, according to KTB. And we'll see how many people reshare that as if it's fucking news and reliable and like and as it's truth as it gets out there. So that's my feeling. And I just think the bigger part of it. So will it be somewhere in the middle of what I think and what ING says that? My point of the frustration of it was the way that society works, the way that we want to we see news that we like and we will reshare it. Yep. Maybe because it makes us feel better. Maybe because it backs what we've been telling people. Obviously, I've got a lot of real estate people I'm connected to on social media. And obviously, every person in real estate wants that to be true along with me. It would help me out dramatically if that was going to happen. But I hate that people are going to be relying on that and betting on that and investing on that when ING has no dog in the fight. And if I was going to look for banking advice and Fed rate advice, they're the last people I would be getting it from. So that's my passion subject.
It's a good topic of discussion, right? Because I've talked about this too on different segments of the podcast of like there's a data set and headline that can support anybody's narrative that they want, right? Or any decision that they're going to make or any decision they want somebody else to make. And oftentimes it's people just selling their bag, right? It's banks like that want to incentivize some type of action that ultimately, is probably not being driven by the most accurate data. So I think the question I would kick back to you, because I think obviously us having these kind of conversations, people tapping into the King's Table, subscribing, participating, dropping questions, asking, things, sharing your own thoughts and comments is the best way to create constructive narrative that is not just one-sided. That being said, though, how do people decipher between all the things nowadays, whether it's news on a war, whether it's news on economics, whether it's news on what the Fed is going to do, whatever it may be, to make the next best decision for themselves based on the goals that they're trying to achieve? What do you say to that?
I think stop watching the news and spend more time with your family.
But your family is not necessarily going to drive maybe the best decisions or information for you, right?
I guess
I know that if I just spent time with my wife and my daughters and some of my family, it probably isn't going to drive the best decision making around my business or economics.
You're not going to make the best financial decisions.
Yeah, I was poking, but what I mean by that was that I think that we underestimate how critically we think about the information that we consume. The guys just on this podcast, especially you, Maddie. But I think that we as a society have to we have to stop looking for what is serving us, right? Whether it's the statistic that supports my buying behavior or not, or I think we've just become this society that doesn't even know how to make decisions regardless of what information we're looking at. And I think that's what I mean. That's not answering your question. It's sort of a smart aleck answer to your question, but
I think from a philosophical, by the way, Aaron, when you post that, go ... and Mike Ayala said it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Check out the chat that I had prepped for you right there.
No, but here's what's interesting about your question, Maddie, is if I think we live in a world that we we want to be in our echo chambers. Like we fall into whatever bias like supports our thought process and narrative.
Yeah.
And I think if you look backwards, like the best leaders, generals, business leaders, etc., we're not looking for yes men on our team, or they're not. They're looking for people with diverse opinions. So I can hear from ING, I can hear from Aaron Amuchastegui, and I can take all the information. And even though I don't know exactly what's going to happen, I can take the best information from here and the best information from here and make the best decision with what I have. One of the first talks that I ever heard was in 2000, and it was Norman Schwarzkopf. And he actually made this statement. He said the best leaders in the world, and Colin Powell kind of backed this up too. He was a protege of Schwarzkopf, but Colin Powell actually said that the best leaders in the world make decisions with 60% of the information. That's not very good odds. And so I think the problem that we have in the world today is it's like, here's my opinion, here's your opinion, and you're wrong. And I would say that I think the best leaders in the world take all the information, or even just us in a daily basis, back to your question, what do we do with that? Listen to all sides of the equation, and then take your own forecast on what you think is going to happen. And when I always say none of this matters, obviously things matter. But the reality is I don't know what's going to happen next year. Nobody has a freaking crystal ball. And so we just have to position ourselves in a place, in a position based on the outcomes. It's the 60% information that Colin Powell said. Schwarzkopf said, the best leaders in the world surround themselves with a team that they trust and that they know. And so even if that wartime leader or whatever it was made a decision that was wrong, that team will take those decisions in a timely manner, and they'll turn it for the good. And that stuck with me hearing Schwarzkopf say that in the year 2000, because we don't know all the information. We don't know what's going to happen. And the last thing that I'll say too, isn't it interesting that we live in a time where the thing that got Aaron fired up about this, if somebody like ING has a platform and enough people, whether it's ING, whether it's who's the guy that the hedge fund guy that wrote all the big books that we all listen to.
Schwartzman?
He's one of them. These guys can move markets.
Principles.
So ING, what is it?
Bill Ackman, Steven Schwartzman. I mean, there's a ton of those guys, right? They sell their bag. They say one thing, and they've already got a position. They've got a position in place that they know that with what they say, and that's why they had the Trump meter, right? When every time he'd go and tweet something, the market would go whoop or go whoop, and it's kind of in line with what you're saying there, Mike.
Yeah, and so with ING, they might have just, I'm not saying this is what they did, but they might see a big opportunity. This is exactly what I was just hearing Aaron say. I mean, he's fired up about it for a good reason, because these guys say stupid shit, and then all of a sudden, because of their follow, everything's just blazing all over. But we live in a day and age where information is disseminated in such a different way that you can literally move markets by saying, there was that guy Schwartzman or whatever 3 weeks ago that said, I'm getting out of bonds. And what happens to the freaking bond market? It collapses for a minute, right? And so
you think he shorted that first? Yeah,
totally, right? And so I'm not saying that it's right, but what I am saying is we live in such an interesting age where information is disseminated so quickly that you can literally change entire markets just by saying something, whether you believe it or not. Look what just happened with ING. Put a picture of the Fed guy and say Fed's adjusting, and they're literally probably moving entire markets.
Moving markets. Remember when Elon Musk said Doge, right? He did a tweet that was a Dogecoin or something. And then within minutes, within hours, within something, the market goes to this incredible number. It wasn't a 1x or a 2x. It was just these crazy jumps from one tweet. And then, a practical answer, Maddie, of what people should probably do is, if there's a topic that's important, you could do a Google that says, why will the Fed cut rates next year? And then you can do a Google that says the reason the Fed won't cut rates next year. So it says, and because then you're going to see all the articles, because you can find an article to back up whichever your theory is. And then you can go into the truth behind it and the facts behind it and the statements that they give you. And then as people, we have to weigh, Do we like the stats from here more or the stats from here more? Whatever you hear on the King's Table podcast, I would give it like a 25% boost of the value. So if it's 50-50 and we're voting one way, then I'd say go with us. But other than that, you should listen to both sides of the story. But I thought it was I started doing it because you can Google why the Fed won't cut rates next year. And there's articles, right? 6 days ago, CNBC said, here's why they won't cut next year. So.
Well, here's our test from this for all of our listeners. When Aaron shares that meme post out, let's see if we can make it go viral to compete with INGs. And then secondarily, what is your final stance? Are they going to cut 6 times? Or are they going to, do aggressive cuts, or are they going to hold steadfast in 2024?
Yeah. What's your vote? Well, I appreciate getting a chance to chat about that one too, because it was, and I think it was timely this week, and something that, if nothing else, should help us continue the conversation on our YouTube page, on our Instagram pages, as we try to get more people over there. And, and for listeners out there, we'd encourage you to, as you start the conversation, help us share it and help people, send them to the right place where they can hear from us to see how they could disseminate for themselves.
Questions, comments, drop those down below for sure. And a couple topics that maybe we can bank. I've got one thing that I'm struggling with is I'm burnt out on personal development, and I'm trying to find a way to re-engage with that in a way that I think serves me. I've been in personal development since I was 14 years old. I feel like I've heard every personal development talk and scheme and this and that. So I'm very interested to hear different discussions and dynamics around that. And my last comment is I hope they keep rates high next year.
Yeah.
I want them to keep rates high.
I think the new normal has to adjust. I think the other reason why they probably won't drop rates is because if they wait another year, they won't have to really. And then technology will bring the cost of construction down, and they'll realize that not everybody needs to buy, the amount of wealth and cash that was generated because rates were so low is unfathomable. Like, I'm really sad that I'm not making the money I was in 2021, but no one should have been. Right?
Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe you should have never been making that. It's like everyone's still on the sugar rush.
Yeah.
It's interesting because if you want rates to stay high, then say they're going to go low and put out a sentiment of, optimism, and people keep spending money and doing things, and then rates are going to have to stay high. So it's like, I think Aaron actually wants rates to stay high, and he's using his influence to say that they're going to stay high.
He's selling his bag.
I'm going to short the stocks.
Any final thoughts as we wrap up today? And first off, I got to give a shout out to Mikey. This was a cool impromptu. I was checking into the hotel. He was cruising out, and I was like, dude, come up, hang out with us. Mike is he's one of my best men in my wedding, one of my greatest friends, greatest teachers. And I'm glad that our King's Table 100 followers now, not 99, got to hear some of his wisdom today. Oh, 102? Oh, yeah.
102. 102 subscribers.
Mike, before I wrap up, any thoughts? We really do appreciate you being here, gracing you with your presence, and maybe we can have you back again. Less impromptu, but either way. Any final thoughts before I wrap up?
No, I mean, nothing really. I mean, I feel like very complete in this conversation. It was really magical to connect with you all and hear your perspectives, and to meet you for the first time was great. What a cool way to meet somebody. And then Mike, for you to jump on halfway through, and I think maybe you were listening to us somehow, because that was pretty masterful what you brought to the table. So just thanks for the opportunity to share. And yeah, I'm glad I got to be on the call. When you accidentally show up early to a meeting and someone's like, hey, you want to be on a podcast? You're like, I'm pretty sure someone out there is supposed to hear something that I've got to say. So I stepped into
meant
that.
To be.
Yes. Thank you for that opportunity. I hope somebody out there got something from
contribution.
I got some
notes for sure.
If you didn't get it from me, you got it from these other 4 badasses.
It's what drives you. That's what I wrote down. Well, what drives you?
And for the audience, if you want us to keep bringing on guests like Mike McCarthy, we got to get to at least 200 subs.
Yeah, there we go.
We'll be at 20,000 subscribers in 7 months.
Conversation was so good today. I'm glad we were able to process that issue. I think going back to basics, spending time with your family, being a good citizen, putting your shopping cart away, picking up the tissue in the bathroom, making your bed at night.
A shopping cart rolling down the freaking middle aisle, man. I'm gonna think of you every time now.
I'm gonna start sending pictures on our group chat of all the shopping carts out.
Peterson, who is probably argued to be one of the smartest human beings on the planet and works with very, very difficult situations. He wrote this book recently called The 12 Principles of Life. His first principle is make your bed. Like start with making your bed. So anyways, love it. This is the best thing ever in my life. I love this so much. Mike, thanks so much for joining. Ayala, thanks for coming and just fitting right in as a glove like you always do. Mooch, thanks for debunking ING as you always do. And Maddie A, thanks for putting away everyone's carts for all of us on our behalf.
I got you.
Love you guys so much. This is the King's Table. Remember, you can only find us on YouTube. If you're here listening to my comment, you're probably already here. But share it with somebody that hasn't heard us. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and make us go viral. Love you guys so much. Thanks so much for listening to the King's Table.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Peace.
Later.